we need cultural competency and gender affirming folks, but particularly making sure that those things are written into contracts that the state has with various providers, making sure that they are upfront aware of a need to do that, and also they are monitoring their ability. We need a governor who is passionate about advocacy and goes to HIV treatment clinics and goes to, once we set them up, needle exchange programs. And finally, we need to change the whole attitude of how we deal with drug abuse and substance abuse in Iowa. Move it away from a criminal justice model into a medical model, so people are not afraid of penalties if they talk to their doctors or if their drug use becomes aware to law enforcement, but they are treated.
I support education and support within our school systems, which is a first point of access for many individuals, particularly in rural Iowa. As we look at access to care, again, we have to be concerned about how many of our providers are losing out on the opportunity to provide quality treatment as we continue a privatized Medicaid system that threatens their very ability to provide services. Of course, when we talk about Planned Parenthood defunding, we're talking about one of the leading providers of healthcare in the LGBTQ community, and particularly when we talk about clinics that have been closed in Iowa, we're talking about clinics that really serve an underserved area of the state, particularly in southeast Iowa. We're going the wrong direction on these things. I've been proud to support funding Planned Parenthood. I've been proud to support increased education on prevention. I've been proud to support a needle exchange program, co-sponsoring legislation and voting for it in the Senate this year. We have a long ways to go, but we have good ideas that we can get started on today.
The LGBTQ community experiences higher rates of victimization from various violent crimes compared to the heterosexual and cisgender populations. According to the CDC, 44% of lesbians, 61% of bisexual women, 26% of gay men, and 37% of bisexual men have experienced rape, physical violence, or stalking. It is estimated that 1 in 2 transgender individuals, 1 in 2, will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime. The Branstad and now Reynolds administration have slashed funding for victim services in Iowa, which support victims of violent crime. Funding is estimated to be reduced even further because of the budget disaster, as well as with the $1 billion, what I just wrote, $1 billion budget disaster, even further, which will mean many survivors of violent crimes will not have the services they need. This has resulted, just so everyone's aware, in the closing of our LGBTQ sexual assault provider in the state already. And just in full disclosure, Iowa Safe Schools is now the only organization in the state receiving victim service funding specifically for the LGBTQ community. And it is not enough. We have a lot more work to do. So, will you pledge today to restore funding to victim services? And what else will you do as governor to support LGBTQ victims of crime? And we will start this question with Kathy.
Absolutely support full funding to make sure that folks have the funding when they've been gone through such a traumatic event. We need to stand up and be there and supportive. I think we can use our voice, and the governor has a role to play in making sure that it is unacceptable. And again, we need to make sure that we don't allow trans gay panic defense in our courts when there are violent crimes committed against our LGBTQ plus communities. So I would support it. I would use my voice. We need to fully fund those things in our state that actually provide services and make sure that Iowans get the care they need, that if there are victims of violent crime, that they actually have the funding. And we need to do a better job instead of giving corporate tax breaks to companies that absolutely don't need it. We need to fund the things that we care about, the things we value, and that are our priorities.
Yes, I would support that. We need to support at an appropriate level and an effective level. That's what we're looking for, an effective level. And making the cuts to the victim assistance program was a mistake. That's something that should be done. I would, as governor, I would work with the Secretary of, or the Attorney General's office to make sure that we are adequately funding, victims, support for victims, survivors, so that they can continue on the fight, continue their healing. Part of it is just as governor making a stand that we don't want this happening. We don't want rape, sexual assault happening in our state. We need to get our public institutions, enforcing the Federal Clery Act to make sure that there's education, that people know specifically what you should and should not do, and understand, what consent means. Just being very clear about that, and that's something the governor can and should do.
My platform advocates to actually rein in the number of nonviolent crimes on the books systematically, and to end pre-crime civil asset forfeiture. And I think you do enough of these sorts of things and you have more than enough money to fund people that are actually to protect people that are actually getting harmed from violent crimes, people that need treatment after they've been harmed, people that have been raped. There's no reason why we should be giving out the most speeding tickets in the country when we can't test the rape kits that we have. We can't use the rape kits that we have, we're short on them. So yeah, I think doing a major civil justice reform will have more than enough funds to support people that are victims of violent crime. And yeah, I think it's going to be life-changing for a lot of people and change the lives of every Iowan.
Yes to funding victim assistance. It's a matter of priorities. Anybody who tells you we don't have the revenue, we have the revenue, we're giving it away. And we take that revenue and put it towards the priorities that are important, that involve people, and that's healthcare, and that's education. If we put it towards those priorities, that's where we ought to be as a state. But I have to tell you, I also think this is about being able to get the therapy to people that they need. And right now, we're terrible in mental health. We're 50th in mental health beds, 47th in providers. And we have to put some resources towards that as well, so that people who are victims of these crimes can get the help they need. I was at a Capital Cities gala the other day, and they talked about people of color who are transgender have 50% of the time try to attempt suicide. We have got to make sure we have the resources available for people so they can get the help they need in our state, and right now we do not. And as governor, I will make that a priority.
Yes, criminal justice is actually one thing the government should be funding. It's one thing the government is not funding. It's cutting funds to. That way they can give more money in corporate welfare. There's a lot of factors to consider in this, though. And one is how many people don't come forward because of the stigma surrounding this that we've allowed to occur. How many victims of rape don't come forward? How many of them never get prosecuted because people don't believe the victims? That's one thing also that the governor and the legislature should look at is, are these crimes even being properly prosecuted? There's a lot of criminal justice reform that we could do, not caring so much about the teenager that smokes a joint, but actually going after criminals and making sure that eliminating the stigma that surrounds it. So if you are abused, if you are being stalked, if you are violated in any way, that you feel safe and comfortable coming forward, and we as a society will support that.
Let me get a little more political with you for a moment. Of course, that's an easy pledge to make. It'll be in my governor's budget I propose, but it doesn't happen unless we have a Democratic legislature as well. I've spent a disproportionate amount of time in this campaign in rural Iowa. Why? Because in 2002, our Democratic gubernatorial candidate, Tom Vilsack, won 62 counties, and our U.S. Senate candidate, Tom Harkin, won 82 counties. In 2014, our U.S. Senate candidate, Bruce Braley, won 15 counties, and Jack Hatch, our gubernatorial nominee, won 1 county. We will not win this governor's race, we will not reclaim the legislature and get that done unless we earn votes back in rural Iowa. That's the math, folks. Y'all familiar with Einstein's definition of insanity? If we do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, we're insane. So as Democrats, and all of you, connect with your rural voters. Reconnect on values about why we're fighting for them. Because we have to win back rural votes if we're going to win this governor's race and we're going to win the legislature and get funding for these types of programs.
Well, of course, victim services and mental health are a high priority. I don't think there's any disagreement among that. That's been a Democratic platform issue for a long time. We need to, once we have a Democratic legislature, not be afraid to say, we are going to start spending money on programs that Iowa needs. We can't shirk away from the idea that government needs to be expanded. We need more tax revenue to do what needs to be done. I will propose a massive tax reform proposal, not like tax reform we have now, but tax reform that gets rid of all the exemptions and deductions and credits that the rich use to avoid their taxes. Lawyers will start paying sales tax just like plumbers do, and lawyer fees just like plumber's fees. The other thing, of course, is we can expand our mental health system by bringing in $200 million a year by legalizing recreational marijuana like Colorado has done, and also have all kinds of massive health benefits for folks too.
I sit on the Appropriations Committee in the Iowa Senate, and if anyone in this state is a fiscal conservative, they cannot support what this administration has done in fiscal mismanagement. At a time when our economy is stable and growing, I sat on the Justice Systems Appropriations Subcommittee as they pushed through a cut that disproportionately reduced services for victims of sexual assault, domestic violence. I mean, when we're talking about our ability to take care of each other, and these are services that had matching fund components. So not only were we losing $1, we're losing $2 for each of these cuts. It's absolutely irresponsible to see this going on. And the consequences are very real for some people that are in a very vulnerable place in their lives that need help and assistance as they put things back together out of terrible situations. So yes, we definitely need to support these programs, do everything we can to help people, and we have to have a responsible budgeting process. That's not taking $1 out of every 7 out of the budget, as Senate Republicans just proposed to do.
So in 2009, Governor Culver asked me to take over the leadership of the Iowa Department of Economic Development. And we had a film tax credit scandal that was costing our state millions of dollars. I know what fiscal mismanagement looks like, and I fixed it then, and I'll do it again. Because we've got plenty of revenue in this government, we're just not spending it wisely enough. We're wasting it on wasteful corporate giveaways. We need to take that money and use it to fund education and healthcare and our judicial system. We need to fund our mental health courts, we need to fund our drug courts, and we need to fund our victim services. The money is there, it just takes a leader who knows how to manage that budget better and put the money behind the right priorities.
All right, well, we're gonna wrap up here with our closing statements, and we'll, so they have 90 seconds to do this, and we'll start with Ross.
Well, once again, thank you all for being here, and those viewing the streaming of this. It is so important that our next governor, as well as us working to get folks in the legislature that are going to promote our civil rights. Protecting civil rights and ensuring a welcome, inclusive Iowa, it makes sense for the success of all of us. And a feeling that we all belong. I've talked about the importance of diversity and inclusion and creating that sense of belonging. I draw upon my experience as a local elected official, as someone who's worked in the school district, as someone who's been director of a nonprofit human service organization, and as a parent, a family member who's had folks who are part of the LGBTQI+ community. I wanted to share a little bit, and I know we're limited on time. All of us, you've heard a lot of unanimity here, but in addition to our background, I just wanted to share just a little positive note that I had from a young person that I work with as part of the juvenile diversion program. I won't name him, but he sent me a note, found out that our campaign's on the ballot, and again, I thank you all for that. But he said that encouragement that he got from me stayed with me and helped him through the dark times. And you never know the impact we can have reaching out to support someone, and that's why we're here tonight. it's not just about us, it's about the next generation, and it's about values. We all know the importance of individual responsibility, but we know we're stronger together when we have a shared obligation to